And now, all the way from America, it's time for the Tea Party Power Hour with everyone's favourite Yank, Mark Gillar.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. I am your host, Mark Gillar. Today, we are very pleased to have a New York Times bestselling author, Kent Heckenlively. Now, you know Kent from many of his books. He takes on the powers that be. He's the author of the Diversity Con. He took on DEI. He wrote a book recently called This Was CNN, The End of Plagues. I mean, there's nothing he will not take on, including things like big tech censorship. So, today, a brand new arena for Kent, even though I know you wrote a novel in college. You're stepping into the world of fiction, of writing novels. How did that happen?
Well, you know, it's really funny because I started out as a fiction writer. That's what I wanted to be. And I got my break in nonfiction with writing Plague about 10 years ago. And since then, it's been just an amazing ride. And I'd like to think what I bring to my nonfiction book is sort of like a fiction writer's view of the world to make it exciting. And then I'd always had this story, The King of Italy. I'd written it in my 20s. And I think with everything that I learned from all the nonfiction books, I went back to it. And I felt that there was something just so strong there. And I was kind of reminded of how Andrew Breitbart always said that politics is downstream from culture. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, this book needs to be in the world because I think that, you know, for me, I'm a person who loves great literature. And I have this idea that great literature should teach us how to live. And my complaint with a lot of modern literature is that it just leaves us broken. And, you know, what great literature should do is point us in the direction of how to live a good, fulfilling life. And I took the history of Italy before and after World War II, and I think that there's really a lot of you know, cause for hope. With what Italy had done after World War II, and you know, our current situation in America. And strangely, even though the King of Italy takes place, you know, the climax is after the end of World War II. I think a lot of what's happening in America today is very similar to what was happening in Italy at that time.
Absolutely. In fact, there's even an election with questionable results. So that tied in pretty well. I'm going to share a secret with you. I am half Sicilian, like you.
Oh, okay.
And my mother's name is Josephine. So, so we have a few things in common. Both sides.
It's kind of like a Batman Superman dynamic there, I guess.
I'm telling you, my mom's parents were from the Palermo area and also the Corleone area. And, you know, I kept reading this book, you know, and it was just bringing back so many childhood memories. And as I read this book, I feel like I was sort of being clued in on a part of my history that I didn't know about. And I'm actually going to a visitation tomorrow night for someone who's passed in this area who was easily one of the most prominent Italian businessmen in this area. And so I know I'm going to be shaking hands with a lot of people with similar surnames to what we heard in the book. And so the whole time I was going through the book, it just kept bringing back memories. I kept thinking, you know, within the next few pages, there's going to be a St. Joseph's table or something, because that's what I grew up with. I grew up in my mom's hometown. We were surrounded by Sicilian relatives, and that's really no disrespect to my dad's side of the family, but that's really the side of my family that I identify with the most because I spent time around all those people when I was younger. So yeah, I was reading this and I was just saying, man, that's exactly like something a Sicilian would say or a Sicilian would do. So anyway, I just want to tell you that I read the book with a particular intensity and I enjoyed it very, very much. You're one of those people who's blessed to be able to decide where you want to be in the literary world. You can write fiction, you can write current events. You do a great job of both. I've got several of your books sitting on my shelf right now. So anyway, as a Sicilian, particularly a half Sicilian, I
Yeah.
enjoyed the book greatly. And then when I read at the end that your mom's name was Josephine, I was just like, oh, wow. Yeah. So I'm going to get back to the book, but I just wanted to share that with you. And I already, in fact, I was talking with a Sicilian friend of mine a few minutes before this interview started, and I told him there was something I wanted to talk to him about, and I'm going to talk to him about it after the show. And what I'm going to talk to him about is that he needs to go out and get a copy of The King of Italy because he's going to love it. So anyway, now let's talk about this book. Even though it is a work of fiction, there was a strict adherence to historical accuracy. How hard was it to make the narrative overlap perfectly with the history?
It just kind of came together. Somebody asked me that at a book signing, how much research I did. And, I said, well, I did as much as I needed to, we had family stories of banking with A.P. Giannini, who is the founder of the Bank of Italy, later the Bank of America. Mm-hmm. And then, I go into the record and I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to know everything about A.P. Giannini. I need to know, what was he like? What was his philosophy? You met him, if you met him, what was he like? And the thing that I really want to do with this book is that in American literary culture, The Godfather is dominant, and it's a wonderful book, but it's really kind of a dark masterpiece. And I thought to myself of all of the Italians and Sicilians that I know, and it's just such a warm and inviting culture. And I thought, Italians really haven't gotten their due in American literature. And I just wanted to put that out there, especially because Italians have this really interesting history of, we had our own empire for a pretty long time. And here we are in the American empire. And, maybe there can be some dialogue between the wisdom of the old empire, with the new empire, that's kind of like a teenager walking through the world. And I thought, I just really want to create that sense that, when we look at empires, when we look at things like capitalism, there is a question. Yes, it's the greatest system in the world, but the next question is, who are you in that system? Are you the wolf just trying to get things for yourself? Or are you the shepherd who's trying to protect the community? And just all the Italians that I knew were so much in the shepherd mold. And I just felt like that idea has not been in American literature for a long time, and it needs to make a reappearance.
Well, indeed it does. And I can just tell you that I couldn't put the book down. I mean, I eventually did, given its length and when I started it. But I have to tell you, I don't think it just has to be a Sicilian American reading the book, as it was in my case. It's just one of those things where you want to, you did such a great job developing these characters. And you want to see what happens to them, and you want to see the lessons they learn as they go through life. And I think that there are, as you said earlier, some important lessons for those of us living today with what's going on in politics today. And I think a lot of young people should read this book. That's my feeling. Now, you're actually a science teacher, right?
Yeah.
What grades do you teach, or what level of college, or what?
It's middle school.
Middle school, okay.
I jokingly say, I get the people, I got the kids who are trying to figure out who they are. They're awkward. They don't know where they fit into the world. But God, are they so honest? I love their honesty. They're not high school, too cool for school. They're not, the college. And it's just an age that I love because they're open and curious about the world. And, that's the way I want to be in the world.
What lessons did you want to teach to potential young people who read this book about capitalism, about Marxism, about Mussolini, about our history?
Well, one of the things that when I was in college that I loved that my teachers instructed me, and I feel like I got a classical education, is that literature is about finding the dark and the light in every human being. I remember I had this one teacher say, good versus evil is a story, good versus good is literature, meaning that we should understand that the heroes have darkness in them, that the villains have the potential for light in them. And one of the things that got me about The Godfather was that there was no path to salvation for Michael Corleone. And I compare The Godfather to Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And I make the argument that Crime and Punishment is much better literature in the classic sense than The Godfather. And the reason for that is that in Crime and Punishment, there's a terrible crime. Raskolnikov, a young college student, idealistic, commits what he believes is a justified murder. However, he ends up having to kill somebody else who is completely innocent. And the detective, Porfiry Petrovich, he wants to solve the crime, but he also wants to redeem the killer and to make Raskolnikov understand that the ideals or the ideology that he was following, which led him to kill, was wrong. And so in the book, I've got a character who's like Michael Corleone, Vincenzo Nicosia, very difficult situation in Sicily, consistent with, some of the terrible things that have happened there. But what I give that character always is I give him the opportunity to make the right choice. And he's sort of opposed by his nephew, Alex Falcone, who ends up going to fight in Sicily, in Italy and in Europe, having to make a decision very much like his uncle did, that involves politics and really the fate of Italy. And so I kind of felt that what I wanted to do was I wanted to show, both the dark and the light, that, we all have darkness in our souls, and that it's important to choose the light, but to understand that sometimes that thing which makes us choose the right path can be the smallest thing, the most insignificant thing. And so to have a little bit of humility before the world. And what I really like that my character, Augustus Patrio, who I figure is the good face of capitalism, is he's a shepherd. And he is a man who's made the decision that I'm always going to try to be helpful to other people. I'm not, it's not that I don't have, terrible things in my soul. It's that every day I'm going to try to choose the right thing. And I think that in this current situation where forces are pushing us to the darker angels of our nature rather than the better angels of our nature, I think a story like this that reminds us that even in the worst of situations, we can make a good choice is important for people to hear.
Absolutely, it is. And, it's funny you should mention that because there are so many people that I see on social media asking questions openly about when does the Civil War start? When do we get out our guns and start shooting? And right now, the world we're living in is causing a large number of people to think that they might be able to commit crimes, to commit acts of violence. And we need this type of message right now. We need to take a little break, do a little business with America, and we will be right back with Kent Heckenlively.
You're listening to Mark Goulart. He explained the way things really are.
And we are back with Kent Heckenlively, the author of The King of Italy. In your book, you draw some connections between Hitler and Mussolini, perhaps a little more closely than others have done in the past. Would you like to address that?
Yeah. So one of the things that another reason why I wanted to write this book is whenever the story of World War II is told, it's usually told through a German perspective and sometimes a Japanese perspective, but very few books have been written about it from the Italian perspective. And I think the Italian perspective is really important to understand because the first place that embraced fascism was not Germany, it was Italy, with Mussolini taking over in 1922. And, continuing to rule at least a portion of Italy until 1945. And so I think that provides a different perspective. The other thing that I wanted to show, because I don't feel like it's been covered in history well enough, is in the story of World War II, we always focus on how the Germans continued to defend Hitler right till the end, be completely fanatical. Well, that was not the Italian experience. The Italians hated the fascism. They turned on Mussolini, and in the historical record, what happens is Mussolini is killed and hung up by his heels in a plaza in Milan, in front of a crowd of Italians who desecrate his body in really kind of the most unspeakable ways. And I figured, as much as we tell the story of the Germans defending Hitler to the last, there's also another story that people can turn against the darkness. And I felt that as much as the story of Hitler is powerful, the story of how the Italians turned against this fascism is really powerful. And I thought there can be no greater example in world history of good triumphing over evil than that plaza scene with Mussolini, because Mussolini had just devastated the Italian people and the Italian people turned against him. So as much as we can all be terrified by things like the deep state and the corruption of our justice system that I've written about extensively, people can get the message. People can change their minds. And I think we are coming to a time where, I just heard that 51% of the people think that the legal problems that Trump is enduring are not fair. And I'm thinking, that's a pretty strong number of people who know that something is wrong in our system. And hopefully we can, solve those problems without violence.
I hope so. But I've got to tell you, this is lawfare. I mean, they have weaponized the judicial system against him. I mean, they're extending statutes of limitation. They're doing everything in the world. And, much like, I guess, Mussolini in Italy, they're saying, I'm going to do this. I dare you to stop me. They do not think they can be stopped. And I hope it doesn't lead to violence. But as someone put it on social media, in a way, we went to war with the British over less. And I look at this and I just pray that we don't end up in a situation that we later regret. The only thing I think that's kept violence from spiking more is that as a country, we're a pretty soft people. I mean, when you have a war going on, you can't take a break at night to go watch Masked Singer. And that's kind of how I see our current population as being very, very soft, and hopefully that might save us. Now, after the war, there was this referendum, and according to the results, King, is it Umberto?
Yeah, Umberto. Yeah.
Umberto, does not win, and you imply that perhaps everything wasn't on the up and up with the election. Is that to tie it more into what's going on now, or do you actually believe that that referendum may not have been fair?
You know, the funny thing is, I wrote the first draft of this story 30 years ago,
Ah,
and that hasn't changed. And what has been clear to me is that what I depict in the period of about 2 weeks after the referendum, when Umberto did not accept the results of the referendum, and civil war loomed. That is absolutely accurate. There were allegations of American interference, that we wanted the monarchy gone. And what is very interesting is this continues, because I've just recently run across a whole bunch of information that shortly after the events that I depict in this book, the CIA mounted an enormous campaign in Italy in the 47 election to support their favored candidate, and did a lot of stuff. So I find myself saying, like, oh my God, you know, the more things change, the more they stayed the same.
right.
And actually, Alan Dulles was on record as saying, you know, Italy is job number one for the CIA. And I thought, you know, it's the new empire taking control of the old empire. But, you know, everybody gets a vote in things. And that's why I feel like I have other voices in the story who are saying, you know, yeah, you, America, the new empire, are trying to do these things, but we Italians who know the history of the old empire, your plans don't always work out. And I think that's important for people to realize as well.
Now, one of the things that seemed important to you in the book was that King Umberto and his father were not allowed to be buried in the pantheon. So
Yeah.
that seemed to be something that was personal with you. Am I correct on that? And why so?
Well, it seemed patently unfair, and so I guess I got interested in the story because I had there've always been family stories that we were related to the royal family of Italy. My own subsequent research convinces me we're not, but so it's sort of an Elizabeth Warren story, okay? You know, I'm Pocahontas. But you know, I'm trying to be as honest as I can. But what's very interesting to me was I remember going to Italy in my 20s and going to the Pantheon, you know, having this idea that I might be related to them, and actually looking at the tombs of the two kings of Italy who are buried there, and realizing there are two kings of Italy who are not buried there. And I just remember thinking, like, you know, the story isn't complete. And actually, it's very funny because this fact that the last two kings of Italy are not buried in the Pantheon continues to be something that's covered in the Italian press. And so there are still monarchists who feel that this should happen. The fact that their bones are, you know, I guess one of them has been laid to rest in Italy, but at the family estate, not the Pantheon. And I just thought, you know, it's just sort of like an interesting thing, and to understand that you know, people were trying to do their best. I mean, King Victor Emmanuel III did not want to be king. You know, Umberto II really seemed like he was trying to do the right thing, and you know, maybe we should be a little bit more forgiving.
Well, do you think it'll happen one day?
I don't know. Yeah, but one of the things that I did was I sent copies of the book to the Italian ambassador to the United States, and also to to a couple consulates. And then, just as I was doing a little bit of research, and this was just in the past week, I ran across the actual heir to the Italian throne, who lives in Los Angeles, where he runs an Italian restaurant, and I sent him a copy. And so he's the actual, depending on what you believe, the rightful king of Italy. And I thought, oh, this is kind of funny. I found the actual rightful king of Italy, and I'm sending him a copy of the book.
Well, I have to say one thing I don't want to get lost in all this is what a great writer you are. I know you've made your name on current event type books, but this is an extremely well written book. I mean, there's so much wrapped in it. There's peace, there's war, there's love. I have to say the love scenes are very discreet, but also very interesting. If they ever invent those hollow suites on Star Trek, I want to visit Diana. No,
well, see, now here's also the thing that I thought, which has not been covered, especially like in the Godfather books and everything. Growing up with Italian Sicilian women, don't they always tell you exactly what's on their mind?
Oh yeah.
And I thought, for women's fiction, you could have nothing better than Italian women, because they are fiery and they tell you what they think and they don't take shit from nobody.
They really don't. I ended up marrying someone who was 100% English, but so it's a complete opposite of that. But having grown up again in with my mom's side of the family, everybody from somewhere in Sicily, usually around Palermo, and going to the St. Joseph's Stables, going to the Italian church. An interesting story about the church that we grew up going to. It's called St. Anthony's. And it was from the people that were mainly from Palermo. They said that in Palermo, there was a river that went through the city, and that the people on each side of the river didn't like each other that much. And that at St. Anthony's Church, the people from one side of the river sat on one side of the church, and the people from the other side of the river sat on the other side of the church, which I thought, I actually heard that from someone who was a member there but was not Sicilian, and I had never known that. I mean, I don't know which side of the river we came from, but I found that very interesting. I also figured out that some of the Italians from the north don't necessarily like the Sicilians. I was working,
oh no,
yeah, I was working at a shoe store in college, Texas A&M, and I was working at a mall selling shoes, and this Italian family came in, and they were tourists in America, and I jokingly said, well, all these shoes were made in Italy. Why don't you just buy them there? And he said, Italian shoes are actually cheaper in America than they are in Italy. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I'm part Italian too. I'm actually, my ancestors are from Sicily. The guy threw his nose straight up in the air and said, we are from the north. well, bully for you.
Yeah. I also wanted to give like a shout out to the Sicilian people, because we really are looked upon as the mongrel race of Italy.
Yes.
Because we've been conquered from goddamn everybody has conquered us at one time or another.
Yes.
And there's just sort of a certain, it's kind of funny because Sicilians are both calm and excitable at the same time, if you know what I mean.
I know it well. My grandmother fits that category. God rest her soul. Yeah, she was the most calm person on the planet unless something really important happened, and then it was the complete opposite. But and what you said about Sicilian women is right on the money. And if you ladies are listening, I love all of you.
But and my dad, I always had this thing because my dad was Swedish and English, and he said, there's nothing better than the love of a Sicilian woman, but oh my God, if you cross her.
Oh, I have a relative who was married to someone who was not the most pleasant of people. But the joke among the family is that if you really tick off a Sicilian woman, there's no way in hell she's going to give you a divorce. She's going to torture you until the day you die. And that appears to still be what's happening in that particular case. But I always like to ask two questions at the end of the interview. First,
Sure.
is there anything you wanted to tell the listeners that we haven't covered?
I think that well, first of all, I'm just so greatly pleased that you enjoyed the book so much, and that it really caught you, because that's what I found with this story. When I had an earlier version of it 25 years ago, and I sent it to this agent, she told me she stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning to finish it. So I've always felt that this story had a certain kind of power to it. And so I'm so happy to get it out there, and so happy that the early reviews from people like you, and can I encourage you to write a review on Amazon, because those things matter.
I will write a review. This is kind of embarrassing, but I've been banned from writing reviews on Amazon.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, somebody put something up attacking Donald Trump, and I wrote a rather frank rebuttal to it, and I received an email saying that my reviews looked suspicious, and that I was from this point forward banned from giving reviews on Amazon. And what's funny is that for weeks to come, I kept getting emails from Amazon encouraging me to write reviews, because I had written 1,000 of them, and they said my reviews were getting attention, and indeed they did. But anyway, so I'll find a place to write a review, and I will write a nice review.
Just because I want this book to get the kind of love that I think it needs. And so I'm trying, encourage all the people, encourage all your listeners, get the book, read it, write a review on Amazon if they haven't been banned by Amazon like you have. Just really, I think that this should be a great book for people to read, because it shows how you can stand up with honor and dignity and do the right thing. And, I think I've been so impressed by people in the public eye who I think are keeping our country away from civil war. I mean, I look at Jordan Peterson and Tucker Carlson, who have just both gotten up and said in some version of or another, I'm not going to lie. I am only going to tell the truth. I'm inspired by Robert Kennedy saying, look, there are things when people ask him, isn't he scared to be running, that he's going to be shot and killed? And his response is, there are worse things than dying. I think that we need to have that sort of an ideal again in America, that there are worse things than the government coming after you. There are worse things than being injured. There are worse things than being killed. We are spiritual creatures. We are trying to make the world a better place for our children and grandchildren. And this may be the moment where we need to stand up and be the heroes that we hope our families will remember for generations.
Very, very well said. And I want to say a couple things about the book. One, I didn't finish it in one sitting because I started at 10 p.m. I read till 7 a.m. the next morning, fell asleep, woke up at 1 p.m. the next day, and then picked the book back up and finished it.
Wow.
So I came close to getting it done in one sitting. If I had started at the beginning of the day, I may have done it. And then the two signs of a good book for me. One, I still have your characters running around in my head. Okay. Alex, Vincenzo, Diana especially.
Well, one of the things I just want to say is, have you seen the book trailers that I've put together for it?
I saw one of them that came out through Skyhorse, yes.
Yeah, for the audience, you can go onto YouTube and type in the King of Italy book trailer. We created book trailers with images of the characters as I imagined them, and they are fantastic.
I can't wait.
So I encourage people to do that.
Okay, well, I will definitely do that. The other sign of a great book, in my opinion, is that I caught myself doing something when I really, really, really enjoy a book. I'm really having a good read. As I got near the end, I started reading more slowly because I didn't want it to end. And
Good.
yeah, and that is always the sign for me that I'm reading a very good book where I look at, I go, wait a minute, this thing's about 377. Oh, I'm getting to the end, and then I start reading very slowly because I don't
That's
want
great.
I don't want it to end. But just congratulations on a great book. Tell my listeners where they can get a copy of it.
You get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any place books are sold online. And let's drive this up the bestseller list.
Let's do it.
Let's make it the great summer read.
I think it certainly deserves that title. Kent, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an absolute joy having you here, and feel free to come back. I mean, you write books every few months, so
I know.
There's also that CNN. Let's give that a plug. This was CNN that came out way back in February.
Yep.
So that's one people need to check out as well. Once again, Kent Heckenlively, the author of The King of Italy, available wherever good books are sold. Once again, Kent, thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much.
All right. Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.